To a Monday edition of Use Your Words podcast. I'm Paul, and we're back to doing video things again. I know I was going to say I was going to do some good news articles, but to be honest, it was a little difficult finding some of the good news out there. And I was like, you know what? For my own mental sanity on things, I'm just going to take a break for a couple Mondays. And I did. And here we are once again on another Monday episode of Use Your Words podcast. So, as you are aware, because last year, if you were with us at the time, we talked pretty much all of May about Mental Health Awareness Month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month for those of you who are not aware. And in 2020, during this time of Corona and forced lockdowns, this is probably one of the most important conversations to have. Now, I am not here to argue for or against the lockdowns going on in the various states. That is a completely different conversation at a completely different time. I'm also not here to talk about if the governors have overextended their authority and are doing more than they're being allowed, because honestly, that is a state by state issue according to the state constitution. And that's honestly for another time or place, because regardless of what your thoughts are on that, there is a reality that is brewing. And that reality is that we got a mental health thing going on with this. And so I'm going to dig into that a little bit. So what I want to talk about today is kind of, I guess you could say, an update from last year's mental health episodes. Now, I've had a little more time to reflect over the past year, not only about my own mental health, but on how mental health is seen in the general public. And now that we have COVID-19 just kind of out there in the wild, it's on everyone's minds at every one corner, every second of every day. It's in the news all the time. You can't go a day without looking at the news and seeing COVID somehow being displayed in the news and some scary numbers coming up about number of affected, number dead, potential numbers of affected, et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing how that is impacting, everyone economically. But one of the things that we need to think about is how this is impacting people mentally, especially those who maybe are dealing with mental health issues, both diagnosed and undiagnosed. So the first thing I wanted to get to was how widespread is mental health in America? Well, according to an article from healthpeople.gov, as of 2010, now I let me take a tangent here. The government needs to do studies more often than they are. The fact that the latest numbers we have for this statistic is 10 years old is actually very sad. I can understand the data lag behind a year or two, but the fact that we are at 2010 and we're in the year 2020, I digress. So in 2010, 1 in 5 children in the United States had a mental health disorder. The most common of that being ADHD. The same article then says that 1 in 4 adults have a mental health disorder, with 1 in 17 being severe, such as suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. Now, the most common of these disorders reported, and they don't distinguish between severity. So these could be in the 1 in 4 to the 1 in 17 range on multiple, from take it as, think it this way, a scale of 1 to 10, it could be anywhere from the 1 to 10. But the two most reported are depression and anxiety. Now, I will say this, the data is a few years old, like I was mentioning before, and unfortunately, just the way this data is, we can't extrapolate what this data looks like now. So, for the sake of the argument, let's assume it is close, if not the same as was reported back in 2010. Now, that being said, I do want to address something here, especially because it concerns a co-host of Use Your Words podcast for the Wednesday episodes. I know Josh has said in the past that he does not believe that ADHD is a real thing. And I know we have all laughed in his face about it, hoping it was a joke. But he's serious. He does not believe ADHD is a real thing. And I want to be very, very clear about something here. That as much as I love and as much as I respect Josh, ADHD is very much a real thing. Just like all other mental health issues are a real thing. And when people are dismissive of mental health issues, of a condition, regardless of what that is, that is a problem. That being said, I do believe and continue to support Josh's ability to have his opinions be what they are. And I would stand beside him if he ever had to protest to get back his right to say what he said about that. Even though, to be frank and honest, it's wrong. So I want to get that out of the way. 100% ADHD is a real thing. Now, is it maybe overdiagnosed? Yes, I will give him that. Is there maybe some ways that we could help out, especially younger kids, get over these things? Yes, I will give him that from here to next Wednesday. But it is a real thing, and it is something that we need to, take care of. Now, again, thankfully, at least according to this 2010 report, ADHD is not one of the most reported symptoms, but it is something that is out there. And we do have to be aware that ADHD combined with anxiety, maybe combined with other things, could cause a very lethal concoction. That's a cocktail that no one wants to do. And honestly, I would send back to the bartender and be like, no, I need a different one. But I digress. So that being said, let's continue, okay? So what I have noticed over the past, I would say year, up until about February, is that conversations regarding mental health have been going in a positive direction from where they have been in the past. I know this is anecdotal, but I have seen this personally, and I hope that this direction that I've seen continues to be true in not only the circles I'm in, but in society at large. Now, up until the start of the corona lockdowns, if you want to call them that, people were starting to open up and have more conversations regarding their mental health, and the stigmas around mental health, at least from what I've seen, have slowly gone away. And that's a great thing. Now, as far as for me personally, it has been tricky this past year. I'll admit that. So since I last spoke on mental health in May, a couple things have happened. I've celebrated her birthday. I've celebrated her birthday / death anniversary of my dad. I've had my good days and bad days. I'm on the cusp of changing jobs actually right now. So that can always be a stressful time for people, especially with mental health. So we'll see how the next, couple weeks go. But I'm actually looking forward to it. And I'm being very optimistic about it right now. I've learned how to balance more that stress and work from work and volunteering and other things I'm involved with to keep that as best as possible under control by A, saying no to things that I don't need to do, and B, utilizing the coping mechanisms that I've learned in outpatient and inpatient therapy. Now, I won't lie, there have been days that have been rougher than others. There are always going to be those bad days. And not every day has been perfect. There were a few days this past year I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to go to work. When I was at work, I didn't want to do anything. It was a chore and a half to get anything done. But overall, I would say where I am now is light years compared to where I was just a couple years ago. And being in a better mental state in general has been honestly great. And I'm thankful that I'm in such a good state right now. And I'm thankful that I was in such a good state right before February when this whole Corona thing hit. Because as we saw at the end of January, the world started changing. So unless you willingly don't look at the news and you willingly have no idea what's going on because maybe you've always worked at home and you've always been a home person, never gone out, never ate in a restaurant, never hung out with friends or anything, late January, early February, COVID-19 started ravaging the world and all things just kind of went wonky. In fact, it went so wonky that society as a whole has essentially changed in just a few weeks. And things that I never thought would happen, such as snitch lines, I'm not going to go there right now, but quite frankly, that continues to surprise me. I never thought I would see that, and yet here we are, and that's reality that we're in currently in 2020 in America. But beyond the snitch lines, beyond the everything else, the thing that has probably one of the scariest things to see is this large increase in unemployment due to the lockdowns. We went from having a nationwide employment rate from around 3.5% to this article was from last month. So obviously, as of May, this number is out of date. But when this article was written, it said 4.4%. But they're estimating anywhere now between 13 to 20% unemployment by the time people are fully able to return to work. Now, where this gets scary is that it is estimated that between 37 to 40,000 people die per percentage point increase in the jobless rate. Now, not 100% of those people who die are from mental health issues. These deaths include such things as lack of food, unable to access medical care due to lack of money, mental health, suicides, drug, alcohol use, abuse, and other conditions associated with the reduction in money and increase in stress. Now, regardless of my personal stance, of your personal stance, of anyone's personal stance on if the lockdown should be lifted or not, we need to have an honest conversation about the impact of people losing their jobs and not being able to work. Something that we have to remember is that in order to be healthy, not only people need food, sleep, friends, social interaction, love, but we also need, as people, we need a purpose. We need a reason to get up, to get active, to do things more than just lay in bed all day and sleep. People without a purpose have no reason to do anything, and they have no reason to get better or make themselves better. It's because of purpose that I continue to learn and get better in my profession. It is because of purpose that I continue to invest in others as well. It's why I continue to work with the youth group. It is why I continue to work on the worship team, on the tech team. It is why I continue to learn. It is why I continue to speak at conferences. It is why I continue every day to get up, take a shower, and get dressed. Purpose is what gets us excited to try new things. And without it, we grow stale really, really quickly. Beyond purpose, we also need social interaction to be healthy, especially mentally healthy. Adults, for the most part, we've had the opportunity to learn some coping skills and how to be social in these trying times. We've adapted pretty well, at least everyone around my age. Older generation, maybe not so much, but people around my age, mid to late 30s, we've learned to use phone calls, text messages, Zoom meetings, Skype calls, Teams meetings, all to keep in touch. Where this becomes the problem that I'm starting to see is that children and teens haven't had that opportunity to learn how to socialize outside of that one-on-one time. And when I say one-on-one time, I mean in person, in schools, and their support structures that they have at schools with their teachers, their counselors, their peers. And I would honestly say that beyond those who have lost their jobs during this time, children and teens are probably the biggest group of people who have been hit the hardest. Now, these times of isolations are rough on teens. And this is evident by multiple headlines as the virus has ripped through our country. One of the first things that caught my attention was a kind of a blip on the radar was some news about two teens in Sacramento, California in early April who committed suicide. And they partially attributed the stress of dealing with the current pandemic and the isolation because of the pandemic to their suicide. And that kind of got me on edge and watching and seeing what was going on. And that kind of caught my attention that we might be facing something going on here. Now, the next major blip that hit the news, which raised the alarms for me and horribly, was a video that started with the following quote. Day 2 since I buried my son. My son died from the coronavirus, as I mentioned, but not in the way you think. And then this video goes on, and I'm going to link the video with this video. And I'm going to say this. It is heart-wrenching to watch. It is hard. I'm not ashamed to say that I cried like a little baby for multiple reasons. One, I understood that not being able to process and realizing that they had their entire future ahead of them, and knowing that a kid that was 12 and only a few days away from turning 13, why they would want to end their life. Knowing that the isolation that forced upon them was not healthy for them. Now, I chose when I was younger to self-isolate away from everyone, and I know how damaging that is, how easy it is for thoughts to manipulate themselves in your own head when you do not have that social interaction with other people. So I understood from that perspective, and I also felt and heard and saw the pain in that father's voice and face as he recounted what happened to his son and how his 8-year-old daughter found her brother, his son, hanging. It's heart-wrenching. It's a rough video. It really is. And unfortunately, it's just one data point. And I hate breaking it down to that. I hate breaking the death of this kid, this pain of this family down to a data point. But it's one data point in one town in our entire country. And that kid wasn't the first. And unfortunately, he won't be the last to die because of the coronavirus lockdown. And because also of mental issues. And the dad says, he wasn't depressed in that. And I believe that. When you are forced into isolation, it does things to you that's not normal. Humans are meant to be social. Humans are not meant to be in isolation alone. If we voluntarily do it because maybe we're sick or maybe, we're injured or something like that, that's one thing. But to force it onto an entire country at once, there's going to be consequences, and we're starting to see that. So watching this video, a couple things, so the grieving father, he goes on to explain how he believes the closing of the schools, the removal of the support system that his teenage son really needed, outside of his family. Because let's be honest, teenagers, unfortunately nowadays, are way more likely to engage with their peers, with their teachers, with their counselors, and they are potentially with their families. And he says all that's what was responsible, at least partially, if not fully, for the death of his son. Now, I shared this video with Aaron and Josh. And what's interesting is Aaron mentioned, and don't be mad at Aaron, because I agree 100%. What Aaron mentioned was that the man in the video, he looks like a country hick. And I think this brings up another just quick side tangent from me. I won't lie. The guy, when you first look at him, he looks like, a country bumpkin, like, that's a guy I'm going to meet out there hunting deer and, living in a shack in the middle of the woods all by himself. And I like I said, I get that. The guy's name, just if you want to look him up, his name is Brad Hunstable. He is the CEO of Linear Labs. They make electric motors with high torque. He is also the founder of Ustream, which ultimately was bought by IBM and is still in use. They've rebranded it, but they still use it for video services. And the quick side tangent I want to get to here is this is a classic example of you don't judge a book by its cover. We should not give credit to or dismiss someone based solely on how they look in a video. And I'll admit, before I knew who this guy was in the video, I thought, man, this guy's a country hick. He's a country bumpkin. And then after I looked into it, I was like, the guy's smart. He knows what he's doing. And that was just a quick thing for me, a check for me that, hey, you know what? I'm still doing that even today. Because he's dressed like he's ready to go, hunt some turkey. That doesn't mean he's not smart. And just because a person's in a suit doesn't mean that they are smart. Now, I'll say this about the video. It's decently long. It's heart-wrenching. The entire thing is. It's don't do yourself a favor. Don't watch it in the middle of a grocery store or anything like that. Because if you do, you're going to break down the middle of an aisle. And, well, unfortunately, stores are out of tissue and toilet paper and toilet tissue. So you're going to be using your sleeve or your mask if you're wearing a face mask to the store. But what's more important is that concerning what? I don't know. The conclusion that this guy comes up that ultimately it was this isolation, the removal of the support systems. Experts are agreeing with this conclusion, and warning flags are being raised. There's an article from ABC 10 out of Sacramento, California, that interviewed a Sacramento council member. And they said, quote, "We can't allow young people to be collateral damage of COVID-19, referring back to the issues in the article caused by mental health and isolation due to the forced isolation of our response to the virus. So as this lockdown continues, we need to have a serious conversation about how this lockdown is impacting people's mental health, especially those already dealing with mental health issues, as well as those younger and still finding their way in life." So, since this is Mental Health Month, what do we do? Well, I'll say this. This year's Mental Health Awareness Month is very different from last year. I would say this year it's less maybe an emphasis on personal learning and personal learning how to cope with everything. And I would say this is more of a hybrid approach. So, here's what I'll say. If you are someone who is dealing with mental health issues, isolation is hard. I get it. I'm there with you. I make it a point to get out of my apartment at least once a day. Whether that's just to take the dog as far as his little legs will go, especially now that he's older and low injured. So that's not very far, but just at least I'm not looking at the same four walls at all hours of the day. Or I maybe go for a car ride, take the dog with me, just to get out of the house, see something a little different for that day. Isolation is hard. Again, we are not meant to be alone. We are meant to be communal. And I say this, and I'm an introvert, but even I realize I need some sort of social interaction. And I'm not dissing online social interaction, Zoom, phone calls, they help. But there is something completely different between interacting with someone on a video chat where I can either mute or I can turn off the camera for a little bit versus interacting with a person one-on-one, face-to-face, where those minute details of your interactions can be seen and analyzed. That is way different than, "Hi, I'm Josh," waving into a video camera. Okay? So there are differences, but use online meeting software. It does help. It at least can help bridge the gap. Now, since I'm in a decent place mentally right now, thankfully, one of the things that I realized early on was I need to put into practice a few things. I needed to force myself to, I guess you could say, interact. Interact online, interact with my neighbors at a distance, obviously, because we're all doing social distancing right now, right? And I needed to force myself to, message Aaron and Josh every once in a while. Even if it was just to say, "Hello, and ADHD is real." I forced myself into routine, and that is something that is very helpful, especially if you're like, now, okay, I'm going to say this. I'm blessed enough to still have a job during this where I can work from home. For those like, let's say my mom, who doesn't have a job, a routine allows her to have some sense of purpose where she accomplished one thing at least. She got up out of bed, took a shower, and got dressed. That's all she needed to accomplish for the day. And that's great. that gives you a sense of purpose, even in a time when purpose is really out of whack and no one really knows what that means right now. It gives me a little target to say, tomorrow I am going to take out a bag of garbage. Tomorrow I'm going to do the laundry. Tomorrow I'm going to get up at 7 a.m. Tomorrow I'm going to take a shower. What are those things, even small little things that you can set as a target to do? And then what could you do as a routine as well? Maybe the routine is you get up, shower, get dressed, eat breakfast. And that's your routine maybe for week 1. And week 2, you add something on top of it. And until you have like a full day routine. By having a routine, that at least means you're not just sitting there laying in bed all day doing nothing. Because guess what? When you lay in bed doing nothing, it is so easy to just lay there. Trust me. I want to just lay there all day today, this morning. But I was like, nope, I need to get up. I need to do this, and this. And I did. And even so, and having a routine, having a purpose, having small targets to do, it helps you feel good that you've accomplished something, even if it's the smallest of things. Because sometimes, to be honest, when you're dealing with a mental health issue, when you don't want to live, even saying, I accomplished one thing, to everyone else, it might seem or feel like the smallest thing in the world. But to you, you feel like you just won the gold medal in the Olympics. You feel like you're on top of the world, that you could do anything because you accomplished that one little thing. And it makes it easier then the next day to maybe work on trying to get to the second thing that you want to do. Now, I said this was kind of a hybrid effort. So, if you're someone who doesn't suffer from mental illness and you know a friend or a family member that has trusted you enough to let you know that they do suffer from some sort of mental illness, no matter what it may be, check in on them once in a while. Now, don't be obnoxious. Just see how they're doing. Send them a quick text message, do a quick Zoom call. Send them a quick email, Facebook message, however you want to do it. Whatever works in your relationship. Just make sure they're eating, getting to sleep at this time, keep up with their hygiene, etc. And you don't have to be like, Dear Tim, are you eating your breakfast? Are you eating your Wheaties? Be like, hey, I had eggs this morning. What about you? You don't have to be obvious on it. Ask them, just check in on them. Make sure that, that they're taking care of themselves as well. Until this time of lockdown and fear from COVID is done, be honest, we have to realize we're in this together. And we may need to check in on each other a little bit more often, during this time. One of the headlines that I read recently that scares the heck out of me is saying that they are expecting an additional 150,000 people to die as a result of this COVID lockdown from either drug abuse or suicide. And that is scary. I don't want to be one of those additional 150,000. And I don't want anyone I know to be one of those either. And I can imagine most of us don't want our friends and family to be one of those 150,000 either. So if you know someone who is having mental illness, check in on them. Make sure they're okay. I can't say break quarantine or anything like that, just for legal reasons, but you do you. You decide what's best for you and that person to make sure that they're okay. Make sure that they live so that they're not one of those 150,000 that they're unfortunately expecting to die as a result of this. Now, I'll say this. If you yourself are suffering from mental issues and you are having trouble with the impact of this lockdown, there's nothing wrong with reaching out and seeking help. Be that from a trained professional, a therapist, your doctor, be it from friends, family, someone you trust. Reach out. Reach out to a parent. Reach out to your brothers, your sisters. Reach out to coworkers, to someone you trust. Heck, if I doubt anyone will take me up on this offer, but if you want to, reach out to me. uiwords@gmail.com. Your life is more important than a quick decision being made because you feel alone and desperate because of what's going on in the world. If you or someone you know is in critical condition and imminently planning to, or you highly suspect they're planning to take action on them, either harming yourself, themselves, or killing yourself, themselves, act. Don't ask permission. If you feel that they are very imminently going to do this, take them to an ER. The emergency rooms, as scary as it is, and as maybe as much as the person says they may hate you, they will make sure that the person at least will get to somewhere where they can be treated and where things can maybe get stabilized. If you are having trouble, then you're not in a emergency state where you feel like maybe you're just about ending it now. If you need to talk with someone, like I said, reach out. But if you have no one to reach out to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. They can be found at suicidepreventionlifeline.org, as well as at 1-800-273-8255. They are available to chat via phone, as well as through their website. They can chat through text message. Please, don't be a statistic. Don't be one of the 150,000. Don't. It's easy to say I'm done. It's easy to say I don't want to fight anymore. Get it. I get it. I've been there. And it was one of the hardest things, but one of the best things to live. So again, if you or someone you know needs help, reach out. And if you got no one to reach out to, or you don't think you do, trust me, you do, whether you realize or not, you do have someone to reach out to. There's always someone. Just sometimes I understand when we're in that mindset, we don't think there is. But if you don't think there is, there's always suicidepreventionlifeline.org at 1-800-273-8255. Take care of yourself out there. Be safe. And may we get through this epidemic together.